Hello, Jeremy from Rhodeswood in Harrogate. Welcome back to our YouTube channel. And I'm here today at the wonderful Beaucliffe Hall, and a friend of mine runs his vintage watch business from here. Now, many people ask me what am I wearing, what watch have you got on, and I thought it'd be great to meet up with an expert on vintage watches and have a chat. It's a little bit different from talking about menswear. And we'll do a later video as well about this wonderful building, and it also houses the Beaucliffe Drivers Club. The owner has a huge collection of vintage cars, all British, and look forward to taking you inside and meeting my friend Jonathan and looking at some wonderful watches. So Jonathan, good
Jeremy,
to see you again.
great to see
I met
you.
you at a certain party,
Yes,
and we have
yes,
a
we
lot
do.
in common.
We certainly do.
You know a lot more about watches than me. It's one of my passions.
I know
So
it is.
thank you for allowing me to come here and have a look
You're
at.
more than welcome, and welcome to Beaucliffe Hall.
Yeah, what an amazing.
It's not bad, is it?
Amazing place. Yeah, my second home.
Yeah, mine.
I wish.
Yeah, but do come through
Thank
to
you.
the office.
So when I'm doing videos, a lot of our clients say to me, "What watch have you got on?" And we did a questions and answer thing the week, and what is your dream watch? I think they made 100 of it, and I can't afford one. But a lot of our clients are really interested in cars, watches, pens.
Exactly the same. We're all got the same clients effectively, but I think with accessories, it's a bit more of your personality you can put into it. That's that little twist, a bit like a tie or whatever, but just a really nice watch. What you think's nice, you can choose for yourself, and it shows your own personality.
And mood, I think, as well, because
Yes.
I know with mine, I love Mickey Mouse watches. They're not worth a great deal, but when I'm in that mood and I think, do you know what, it's a bit of fun, it's a bit of nostalgia, and then, you go down different tracks, and I'm a bit nerdy in that, I get one of a watch and I might want it in the steel and I might want it in the so-and-so, and, it's... My wife says, when is it going to end? I haven't started yet, love. So what have you got in here, John?
There's also, I've just got from different eras, really. You can see how things changed a little bit. So
Because you're vintage watches, aren't you?
I love vintage watches, and the watch that really got me into it was the mythical watch that you couldn't find in the 80s and 90s. It was just the Rolex Prince. That one is the Tiger Stripe. Tiger Stripe is literally these stripes of gold. There's no plating in it. It's a really difficult case to make.
Is this more rare than, say, just a white gold one or a yellow gold one then?
They did them in all the metals, so you'll see silver ones and steel ones, and some are just straight-sided rather than the flared case, which is always
because this is striped, is
that was really special. Yeah. And you've got the little sub-dial. Some people call it a doctor's dial because you can see the seconds so clearly on it.
Yeah.
But this is dated at 1939, so it's proper Art Deco.
Lovely. Beautiful.
Yeah.
It's on my bucket list, actually. I first
Bogart
saw
had one. I think he's the most famous wearer of a Prince.
I'm old enough to remember when Ralph Lauren opened his first London shop, and he bought Savoury and Moore, the chemists on New Bond Street, and they had a cabinet with one of these in, and I was, 18, 19. Love one. I had absolutely, and I've liked it ever since.
Yeah, it was always the watch that we hunted for, that you hoped somebody would bring in and sell over the counter, which they very rarely did, because this was a very expensive watch in its day.
It was, well beyond mine. And I have looked at them and thought, no, I can't do it.
I think if I'd had one of these in the early 90s, I'd probably been able to swap it for a Paul Newman Daytona, which people will think I'm stupid saying that, but they weren't that popular then.
Okay.
And probably get two Submariners for it. The sports watches were not in the league of something like Rolex Prince.
And I would rather have that all day long. I'm not a Rolex guy. I know a lot of our customers are.
Yeah.
They collect them, and investment purposes as well, I'm sure. But that's one Rolex that I would love to have.
I was quite excited when they said they were going to revive the Prince and bring it back, and then they just made it like a small house brick on your wrist, very, very rectangular. And it just didn't have any of the DNA that
And
has.
didn't Rolex Cellini, or if that's the right way to say it, Cellini, didn't they do a version of the Prince?
Yeah, it was. It was part of their dress range, which is the Cellini range. But there was the rumour that it was coming out, and I just hoped they were going to just make that. But unfortunately, they didn't. but probably sold so many and it was fine. We've just been purists, aren't we?
But this is, yeah. That would look great in my watch box.
Yeah.
How I would deliver that news to my wife. There is another one.
I know how understanding Jules is. She'll say, darling, that's fine.
And she has a lovely antique business. I know you've bought some things.
Yeah, she's got a great business.
Maybe we could do a deal where, you were getting furniture and I'm getting a watch. How do you think that might go down?
You can put a watch on your wrist any time. I've got no room for any more furniture.
I can hear her now. Divorce.
She won't, I guarantee you.
Absolutely a beautiful.
Special, isn't it? I'm really, really pleased to be able to show it. I've not even put it on the website. It's just one of those.
Might not be going on the website.
I'm going to do a
toss-up.
No. A dealer's got to be a dealer. He can't be a collector. That's my thing.
Right.
But
so what else have we got in here?
Well, just going on from the theme of what was popular to modern tastes don't sort of follow as they did. I mean, that's 1946 Rolex Oyster. Well, it's nowhere near anything you think of a Rolex Oyster today, is it? But
no.
You've got the screw-down crown. It's called the Viceroy.
What's the Viceroy?
It's just the model name of it, and it was probably for use in tropical climate because you could screw the crown down so moisture didn't get in. You can see by the dial it's had some exposure to sunlight.
Yeah.
Which I love. I mean, that's its character.
Its character.
From 1946.
It's
worth today a fraction of what it was worth back in the day. I mean, again, I would probably have swapped that for a Submariner, which I'd get £5,000 or £6,000 for.
When you say back in the day, what year?
We're talking sort of early 90s, maybe late 80s, because you've got to think that first wristwatches really that came into an auction catalogue was 1979. It was pocket watches before that.
Really?
There was no concept of owning a pre-owned watch because you got a watch for your 21st and that saw you through. That was the tradition.
Yeah.
A man would have one watch. I remember an 80s book that said that the average Italian man has 7 watches and everybody's like, what do you need 7 watches? One watch for every day of the week? That's crazy. Now, we know people that have got one for every day of the year, don't we? And
yeah.
It's just huge. It's how everything's changed.
For the 262 days. Wow. So the value of that then in the 90s was what?
It's probably then what it's worth now, £1,500. But that £1,500 in the 90s would have bought you a lot.
Yeah. I'm always one for bucking the trend. I rather like the smaller dials. I think for my own personal taste, anything over 40 millimeters, I don't want to wear it, and I'm a big guy. I can carry it, but I like the smaller.
I think
elegant.
you're right. I think if you think about it, the art of watchmaking back then was to miniaturise everything, and it was an art.
Yeah.
And then suddenly they're getting away with 45mm cases and putting pocket watch movements into cases, and you're wearing these huge things. They got away with murder to a certain extent. And it's starting. We're going back to refinement again, and I'm seeing it with younger people as well.
Good.
Which is great.
And I liked the wafer thin. However they packed all the stuff that they could do in a perpetual calendar and get the case really thin, I think is fascinating.
That is art. If you see whether those watchmakers were at the very, very top of the tree, and even now if you went to the Patek factory, you'd just see these guys that are doing the perpetual calendars just completely separate to everybody else. They're proper artisans. And I think we've slipped away from that a little bit, but we're now coming right back.
They're royalty in the staff canteen, aren't they?
Yeah. The cars in the car park are like Premiership players. They get paid a fortune, and why not? And so they should.
Huge demand for them, isn't there?
Yes, yeah. Easily poachable, I think.
Yeah.
So we're going to contrast. So we've got 1939, 1946. In the middle is the war, which changed everything in people's taste because you had to have utility watches and they had to work. So there's no nonsense with World War II, military watch there by a company called Lemania. But have you come across the Dirty Dozen military watches?
No. I've watched the film The Dirty Dozen, but
I think that's where the nickname came from because there's 12 manufacturers.
Okay.
That made for the British forces to this exact same spec. So they all look alike.
So they're exactly the same?
Pretty much, yeah. there's slight subtle differences, but they're pretty much, if you saw them all together, they look alike. This is a rarer one by a company called Lemania, but you look at Omega, they did them lots, you know, some made many hundred thousands of them.
Yeah.
Others, smaller brands, there's one called Grana, which is the holy grail, because they rushed it out towards the end of production and they didn't make that many. But there's so many completists out there that want 12 watches for the dirty dozen.
Oh, that's my language.
And you'd end up paying thousands for a Grana. Way more than you
Wow.
pay for the Omega, a name that you know.
Just because of its
There's very
rarity.
few of them. Yeah, and it completes that set.
So people will have the 12, the dirty dozen,
Yes.
as a collection,
Yes.
all look exactly the
Exactly.
same.
You'd have a box of 12 watches all looking the same.
I like that.
Yeah.
Thank God it's not just me. Oh, I'm amongst friends.
Yes.
Because I did this thing. I got this fascination for, I think it's an Italian watch, Eberhard.
Yeah.
It was a watch with an 8-day movement, and I believe they made watches for the Navy, the Italian Navy, and instruments. And I got it in 18 karat gold. And I thought, I'd like it in steel with a blue face. And then, there's one there in steel with a white face with Arabic numerals, and you've got to stop somewhere, because my pockets are only so deep, and I quite like watches which aren't a bit of the underdog, I don't mean a quality watch, but maybe one that's not had the traction that Rolex or Patek have had.
Yeah, I think I like brands like Breguet for that. Not everybody.
I had a Breguet, beautiful watch.
It's one of my favourite. I'm wearing a sports one now, but
Beautiful.
I think, not everybody's heard of it, or they think you're talking about Breitling, they get it confused.
Yeah.
But, go down the Breguet rabbit hole, and his story of the pocket watches is just superb. It's one of my favourite stories.
My ultimate watch, if you won the lottery twice, whatever, and you could actually find one I said was a George Daniels 35th anniversary watch that they did to celebrate the 35th anniversary of the coaxial movement that they sold to Amiga, I believe. And that was based off a pocket watch with the offset. Very much looks like a Breguet pocket watch.
Yeah, well, he was offered the chance to run Breguet.
Was he?
Yeah, but he didn't. He wanted to have London on his dial, so he kept completely independent.
Right.
But some of the most sort of the history of Breguet has been written by Daniels. He complete admirer, understandably, because he was the watchmaker of king of watchmakers. They say.
And I certainly on I think he made 38 watches in his lifetime, and then obviously they did the 100 limited edition pieces. I think Roger Smith built. I very much see that Breguet pocket watch.
The influence is there with it.
Definitely.
But finding one of those. I've only ever handled one Daniels. Just
have you?
Yeah, we never see them.
Well, I've seen one on a client, and at the time, I've got to confess, I didn't know what it was.
All right.
George who? And then it was a fascinating story, and I've read about him and looked at the things like, gosh, I really would like one, but that's a pipe dream.
He would have approved of Beaucliffe because he was a big car man, big Bentley man.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
Was he?
I think he even had a blower Bentley.
Well, why not?
So next we're jumping up. It's a 60s watch, but it's a watch that was born in the 50s, and that's Omega's Speedmaster, which was originally advertised as a rallying watch, as a sports watch.
Right.
But what nobody expected was that NASA would test a few watches, because they were working obviously on getting up into space. And so they took things like a Rolex GMT Master, different brands were used, and the winner out of everything, manual wind movement, so there's gravity's not an issue. The clarity is absolutely superb. Without Omega knowing, it's not product placement, there was none of that whatsoever. In fact, I'm told that the American government put them under pressure to use Bulliver, which was an American brand, with the new Quartz movement that was all seen.
Perhaps the new president would insist on it. The 31% hike on Swiss watches, I believe.
Doesn't matter how many tariffs you put on it, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And that actually happened. That apparently they had the clocks were made by Bulliver, but they were notorious for stopping, whereas the Speedmaster always worked, was always reliable. So Armstrong took his watch off and left it in the craft to make sure that when they went back, they were going to have type, so it's like belt and braces.
Wow.
So he went onto the moon not wearing a watch as the first man on the moon. So it's Buzz Aldrin that was wearing the Speedy after that. And the whole thing became complete legend.
Talking of Buzz Aldrin, a friend of mine who comes into the shop very regularly, he bought Buzz Aldrin's house in Miami.
Oh, did he? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought so. And I said, under the floorboards, behind the walls, what? Nothing. It's just a lovely house.
Well, his watch was stolen.
Was it?
NASA keep all of the watches that were used in any missions, but his was stolen out of his car. So that's around somewhere. Nobody knows where it is. The actual watch that was worn on the moon is out there somewhere.
Do you know how you said something that gravity would affect an automatic watch, but not a manual one?
Well, it possibly could because you're moving very slowly, aren't you? So it's that rotor.
Not charging it.
It may have done, it may not, but this just passed. It's got a bulletproof movement. The movement in these are fantastic.
So what's this watch called?
This is the Speedmaster.
The Speedmaster.
They call it the Moon Watch, and they've made a Swatch version of it now, the Moon Swatch, that's based on this case.
Yeah, my son has one.
Yeah,
actually.
I think they're great. They're great fun.
fun.
It's a legend of a watch. This one actually was sold in 1969, so it's the right year, if you like. But as you get older ones, the price goes up and up and up because they kept tweaking them and changing them. NASA were looking at things like protecting the pushers and crown, so there's little tweaks. There's books, big thick books written just about that watch, and all the variants of it. So it's another rabbit hole. You could just collect nothing but Speedmasters, and I know people.
I think I've read 2 novels in my life, but books on cars, watches, Louis Vuitton luggage.
Yes.
Which, you learn by reading.
Yeah, you do.
And I love coffee table books that you dip in and out of, reference books.
Yeah.
And then you absorb this. Not if you're interested. I mean, I was never interested at school. That's why I ended up working in a shop because no one had asked me. My friends all went to be engineers. They earned 8 times what I earned, but I wanted to follow my passions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it sort of gets you, doesn't it?
Unfortunately, it does, but you need a job to pay for it all.
So we go on. Breitling also, they're not as well known for being in space, but this one, Cosmonaut.
Ah, okay.
That was used in orbit on one. Scott Carpenter wore that.
Right.
So there's a little bit of history, and so they still make a Cosmonaut now with a 24-hour dial, which is a nightmare to read, I think. 6 o'clock, 12 o'clock and everything.
I've got my glasses on and I'm thinking, well...
Yeah, but highly relevant and an important piece in its own right.
And that's
very
an unusual... Is this a bezel?
Yes, a slide rule.
Ah,
if we remember how to use a slide rule at school.
I've just told you at school. Yeah. And talking to Alison Halliwell behind me.
How you're flying and trying to read that and make calculations, I've no idea. But they were the pilot's watch, and they had a cult following in the 60s. And some of the drivers had them. Jim Clark, we've got pictures of Jim Clark wearing one because he was an amateur pilot. Graham Hill as well. So it was just, it sort of got that cult sort of look to it. And then we're moving on to something that has become one of my passions, which is Hoya. You'll know it as Tag Hoya.
Yes. I was going to ask you, where's the tag gone?
Yeah.
I suppose like in our trade, I mean, the tailors that everyone, knows the names of now, like Gives and Hawk, that happened in 1974.
Yeah.
Gives was Gives and Hawk was Hawk.
Yeah.
And if you notice, if you're on Savile Row, you have these names and like solicitors' practices, they absorb and they join. I think in those days it was to save on rents. You get 3 tailors in one unit.
Yeah,
they became whoever. Well,
we find with the watch industry, the 70s went through a crisis that we call the Quartz Crisis.
Yes.
Remember all the digital watches in 73, 75? Battery watches took over everything.
Yeah.
And all these brands struggled to keep up, and most went bust. Omega were bought out, became part of the Swatch group. Swatch bailed all these brands like Longines, became one big group just to try and keep going.
And didn't Breguet become part of them?
Breguet became part of it, yes, yeah. It's got a different past of different ownership. Right. And with Hoya, Jack Hoya was the last family member, kept it going until about 1980, and then got into difficulties because nobody wanted these big watches anymore. It was all this modern quartz. And so he was taken over eventually by Tag Techniques Avant Garde, which was a Saudi sponsor of Formula One teams, and I think they were also in finance. So they took over and put their tag on top of the Hoya.
And what year was that?
85.
85, okay.
So it did a lot of good things because it brought out the Formula One watch, and you remember all the colours of the. They've just reissued it now, literally just now. But it was sort of like a swatch, but you could get it in all different colours. Then it retailed for about £80, whereas a swatch was 40. And it got a real following, and it built up this whole brand. So they were making quartz watches. They were everybody's 21st watch. Mm. But what happened was that people forgot about Hoya completely, and I was really frustrated that I was trying to sell something like this wonderful Carrera from the mid-60s, and I couldn't get £250 for it. People would say, I don't want a second-hand tag, I don't want a tag.
Yeah.
And you try and tell them, well, it's a Hoya, and there wasn't that much written about it because the internet wasn't around then. So I just kept most of them to one side and just thought, well, I'm not going to give them away at £250 a time. And in 2000, or just before, Tag Heuer reissued this watch and just kept the Hoya logo on it, and it took off exactly the same. They did a brilliant job with it, and that started a revival really into the Hoya brand that people were asking. In fact, it was so successful, they started having to put Tag on because people were thinking that Hoya was a different brand to Tag Heuer, and they were building this monster for themselves.
So has that made the first issues, one that just said Hoya on, more valuable than ones that then set Tag Heuer on?
Yeah, still very desirable. And they're still, to be fair, Tag Heuer is still making certain limited editions and bringing them out with the Hoya name because they've absorbed their history, they understand the history of it. And this watch, it's not to everybody's taste.
I like that. I think that's a cool looking sort of a watch with a retro
you're right to say
feel.
cool because it was the king of cool that wore it, Steve McQueen in Le Mans, in the film Le Mans, just for that one film. It didn't do well in the 70s, but they revived it at the time of this Carrera. After the Carrera did well, they then revived the Monaco, and it just took off. And it's been huge ever since. It's been hugely popular. But that's an original. That's from 1971, just the same reference that McQueen wore.
Yeah, it's rather nice. I like that.
It's not to everybody's taste.
I like it.
It's
I love
avant-garde.
these rally straps, which obviously are appropriate to the watch. So when this took off again, are there different versions of this, and is there one to look out for that's more valuable than the other, or?
Well, there's many versions of it. There's the new one that's just come out. There was at the last Grand Prix that they did in white ceramic with a split seconds movement in it. That was by the same people that make Richard Mile's movements, and I think it's about 130 grand.
Wow.
But you can get, there's a reissue version of blue like this. There's limited editions that come out sometimes with Steve McQueen's signature on the back. There's lots of different versions of it, but to some people, the purist, that's reference 1133B, which is what McQueen wore. We've got a poster of it over there with him wearing it. Yeah. And it was purely by chance. He could have picked any watch out of the box because he had to wear a Hoya because he wanted to look like Joe Siffert, who was very successful and was driving the Porsche 917s. He wanted that look, so he got the overalls made, and they were sponsored by Hoya. So they sent watches, and he chose that.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I really like that. And I am seeing some of these about more, in people that sell vintage watches. I can't resist. You go past a shop and it's got some watches in. I have a look.
It's iconic now.
Yeah.
It fell foul to the fashion of the time. So that's 1971. By 1973, the digital watches were coming out and they were really trendy, and people were living them with calculators and stuff on.
Yeah, and I've seen James Bond probably go like that.
Yeah, well, he did. Yeah, he did wear Seiko at that period, which pretty much wiped everybody out.
One of my favourite brands, and something I'm a bit nerdy on, is I think an underrated brand called Chronoswiss, which I believe you.
I know it really well. Yes.
You distributed it, didn't you?
Yes, back in the day, and there's a real Hoya link as well, because Gerd Lang was one of the main men at Hoya, certainly on the service side, and I think I'm right in saying that he took the collection down to the film set to Le Mans for Steve McQueen.
Oh right.
And so when he came out with if you find his book about chronographs, it's probably the most definitive book on chronos. It's really wonderful, really detailed. He was a proper movement man, bought old movements, created watches around it, and then the brand evolved. Very Breguet in its style.
Gerd Lang.
Yes.
Yeah. I'd read somewhere that he'd come from Hoya and started this brand, and I'm a big fan of it. It's very accessible, and you get an awful lot of watch for little money.
An awful lot of workmanship as well.
Yeah.
He really did, because he was a proper watchmaker. His attention to detail was fantastic, and he'd get inspiration from Hoya, but from old regulators. His regulator watch is excellent, from the old clocks. And he'd have these pieces when we went to the stand in Bar. He'd have these old pieces to show where his inspiration had come from, and you don't see that very often.
No, and I'd read, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you know more about this than I do, but I can answer questions on tailoring if you have any. Didn't they have a sort of a regulator clock in the factory because they were concentrating on the hour hand accuracy, and the minute hand was secondary, or is it the
other way around? The minute hand, you sort of know what hour it is, but you'd see the minute hand was always dominant on a regulator. Yeah. So yes, you're quite right. Observatories had them as well.
Did they? They take a little bit of getting used to reading them. I have one, but I'm thinking, is it 2:30, or is it?
You're not wearing it enough. I think if you wore it for a week, you wouldn't think about it. I've had one as well, and once I got used to it, you just do that. You're just looking at the minutes.
Right.
It's subliminal that you look at the hour. I think that was the whole point of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Popular today still? Are people still making them?
Regulator dials, yeah. There's all the complications are rolled out in different guises. I think Gerd Lang was years ahead of his time, really, with what he was doing. It's just unfortunate that it didn't succeed, because I think it would now, when you've got people, a lot of independent watchmakers now, which you perhaps didn't have back then. So people like F.P. Jean on a different level completely, but there's interest, whereas before it was either Cartier or Rolex, and it was difficult to break that barrier.
Yes.
Breitling did for a while, and then they made big watches that were too big. So yeah, I think it's a worthwhile brand to collect, I think.
Well, there we have it from the horse's mouth.
I think it is.
I'll let Jules know. On the advice of Jonathan.
Yes, it'll sit nicely with the Rolex Prince teller.
Yes. Jonathan, it's an absolute pleasure.
No, as ever, absolutely love talking to you about watches. We can talk
we've
forever.
looked at 7 watches. I know you've got many more.
Many more.
So it'd be nice if you'd allow us to come again and have a chat and...
Yeah, let's show a bit more of Beaucliffe, I think.
Yeah,
next time you come, we'll
absolutely
maybe try and be in the wing or in the drivers' club if it's not so busy.
Yeah, it's a special place, isn't it?
You can't describe it. Yeah. I've told people about it, and they've thought, and then when you get here, it's like, wow, I wasn't expecting
I've been blown away today. I was talking to Jonathan, and in the kind of the heart of the drivers' club, he's saying these rare paintings he's got of cars. There are prints in the RAC club, and prints in wherever. They're the originals.
Yeah,
and it's a privilege.
Did you see the original cartoon drawings?
Yes.
So he's got the page of the magazine, but actually the original drawing.
Yeah. So we're going to come and do a video about that, because it is fascinating. I mean, you have to be a member, but you can, I believe, come to Beaucliffe to hire it out for a wedding or for an event, a private event, corporate. It's just...
Yeah, I think if you get the chance of an invite to come to Drivers Club, it's you've got to do it.
I'm hankering.
We'll have lunch next time. Did you notice the ladder at the back? A random metal ladder that's just stuck there.
No.
I get asked so many times, why is that there? And it's the rear gunner's ladder for a Lancaster, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, because it has a strong aviation tie, this, doesn't it? I mean,
yes, it was owned before by Robert Blackburn, so it's a big aircraft manufacturer, and that's when you go into the wing, you'll see all of that aircraft influence in there.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. We'll do that next time.
We'll come and do that, yeah.
I'll find some more watches for you.
Jonathan, it's a pleasure.
As ever, great to see you.
And you.
Take care.
So I hope you enjoyed that chat with Jonathan. Fascinating chap, and we hope to visit again, because his stock is forever turning over. That Rolex Prince, I'm still thinking about it, if it's still got it. These are some of our watches, which are perhaps by comparison, these are all one of my passions, Mickey Mouse watches, lovely vintage pieces. But I hope we'll get together again with Jonathan at Bowcliffe Hall, and indeed bring you a video about Bowcliffe Hall itself. It's a fascinating place. So look forward to seeing you in another video. Thank you very much, and I hope that you'll like and subscribe.